Yesterday was Stanley's birthday, so I wanted to do a video honoring him. So today I'm gonna give you guys my top 10 favorite Marvel movies of all time. Marvel Studios for the past decade has been making some really good movies and a whole lot of money. And they have multiple franchises. They have the X-Men franchise, they have the Spider-Man movies, they have the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is my personal favorite, and obviously they have the Fantastic Four franchise. I promise you none of those movies are going to be on this list, but anyway, I absolutely love almost all of their franchises, other than obviously the Fantastic Four movies, so I really enjoy them. So let's get started with this video with a few honorable mentions. So first off, we have Spider-Man Homecoming. To me, Homecoming is just a really fun movie. I really have fun watching this movie. I think it's a blast. I think Tom Holland is a great Peter Parker and a great Spider-Man, which is like the best combination. Because I think the past two Spider-Man, they're really good, but I think Tom Holland just takes it to another level, and he actually feels like a high schooler. And I think our villain here is amazing. Vulture is a great villain. So that's why I have this movie as an honorable mention. The reason I can't quite get it up to my top 10 is because it's just not that emotional or thematic. Next up, we have X-Men First Class. To me, First Class is a really good movie. I think just the way it follows up from the original trilogy of the X-Men franchise, I think that's really good. I think the movie does a great job of that. So I really enjoy this movie. I think this movie does some great stuff with its characters, so it is going to be an honorable mention. Next up, we have X-Men Days of the Future Past. I think this movie is slightly better than First Class because I really enjoy the story for this movie, and I think the time travel aspect works really, really well. And finally, we have Avengers Age of Ultron. I know Age of Ultron isn't a lot of people's in their list, but to me, it's a really great movie. I don't feel disappointed. I personally think it's really good, and obviously to me that's the first MCU movie I've seen, so that's the movie that really got me into the MCU, so it has a special place in my heart. Kicking off my top 10 is going to be Deadpool. I think Deadpool is a really fun movie. I think the humor in this movie is really good. I think Ryan Reynolds does a great job playing this character of Deadpool. I just almost can't imagine anyone else playing him. I think there's some really good action scenes in this movie. I think the opening scene with the whole car chase and then counting your bullets thing, it's funny and it's a really cool scene at the same time. I think it's choreographed really well. Whenever he makes jokes, it works really well. And then I think even the side characters in this movie are really good. I think the villain's good. I think Colossus is good. I think Vanessa works well. So I think all the characters play off Deadpool really well. I think why I can't get it into any higher than here is because the movies higher have resonated with me more than this one has. Mostly this reason is on this list because of the humor and because of the action. I think the thematic and emotional parts of it, it's there, but it's really less, which is why I can't put it any higher than right here. And number 9, I have Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I know this is a lot higher for a lot of people. A lot of people actually have this as their favorite Marvel movie. I personally don't. I really love it, but I just can't quite get it up there. I really enjoy this movie. I think there's some really good action scenes. It's probably one of my favorite action movies of all time. I think this movie is not really a comic book movie. It feels more like a spy espionage thriller. From beginning to end, we have this feeling that we don't know anything, and the bad guys can attack, well, not us, Captain America, anytime. And we just don't know who is, like, trustworthy in this movie. So I feel like that really, the Russo brothers did that really well, make us feel dread and all that. And I think just putting Captain America in this world where you can't trust anyone, things are corrupt and all that. Because back then, there was just two sides back when he came from. The good side, the bad side. It's that simple. But here, there's corruption, and that really makes it really hard for him to stay in this world. So I think the movie does that really well, and just putting Black Widow near him is interesting because Black Widow is this character. She's a spy, so obviously she lies. No one knows what her real identity is, so I feel like the movie does that really well. So I gotta give it that. And obviously this is the movie that got the Russo brothers into the MCU, so I really appreciate it for that reason. And just, I think the action in this movie is amazing. I think probably my favorite fight scene in this movie is the highway fight, but every single fight scene in this movie is well shot, has really well choreography, so I love it. And number 8, I have Spider-Man from 2002. I think this movie really holds up for an 18-year-old movie. I think every time I watched it, I think I watched it 2 times so far, I think it's just a great feeling. I think just from beginning to end, the movie has a great storyline and it continues the overarching goal really well. I think just the main plot line of Peter turning into like a hero, I think it's just a really strong plot line because throughout this entire movie, he's just a teenager for like the first half, and suddenly he needs to turn into a hero because, well, he's given these powers. Obviously, we get the line here, with great power comes great responsibility. I think there's just some really good moments in this movie. I think just Peter himself, just the arc he goes throughout the movie is just powerful stuff. I think the final battle in this movie is probably one of the best Spider-Man final battles. Now, obviously, it's not some kind of massive scale battle, but it's a small, intense fight between Green Goblin and Spider-Man. I think it just, because it's really small scale, it feels more realistic. There's just a lot of stuff in here that people can actually relate to. So I really enjoy this movie. I think it still holds up. I know a lot of people prefer Spider-Man 2 over this one. I personally don't. I think this is probably the best live-action Spider-Man movie. At number 7, I have Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I said Spider-Man 1 was my favorite Spider-Man live-action, but this one is just my favorite Spider-Man movie in general. I think this movie has almost everything I want in a comic movie. It has some really good action sequences. I think the final battle in this movie, I think, is my favorite final battle in any Spider-Man movie. I really like the villains. I think every single villain is really good in this movie. Kingpin is really good. Dr. Octopus is really good. And Prowler is really good. I think those 3 are like the main 3 villains that get the most screen time. That's why I mentioned those 3. There's also others: Tombstone, Green Goblin, Scorpion. So yeah, even though there's so many villains and even so many heroes, there's like 6 heroes in this movie, it doesn't feel overly stuffed. It doesn't feel like there's so many things going on at the same time, which I think this movie handles really, really well. Because there's other Spider-Man movies, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3, that have so many characters, so many heroes, so many villains, and it just feels really stuffed and bad. So I think this movie handles it really well, and even the themes in this movie are really good. I think there's just some powerful scenes in this movie. The Leap of Faith scene is really good. The scene where Miles' dad is talking to him when he's tied up, that's a really powerful scene. So I think that's done really well. I think even the characters from the beginning to end are handled really well. My personal favorite is probably Miles or Peter B. Parker. I think Gwen Stacy is really good too, but those 2 are the ones that they show the most change from beginning to end. So I really like that about this movie, so it comes in at number 7. At number 6, I have the Avengers. I think Avengers, when it came out, it was a huge thing because at that point in time, there was no movie like this. There was no movie that merged 4 different franchises and made one movie. So this movie was the first team up movie because you had Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, and Hulk. They had their own 4 movies, and they had to bring all of them together and mix all those franchises. And that's a really hard thing to do because they're like completely different characters. Iron Man's a billionaire philanthropist. Captain America is a soldier from World War II. Thor is a god. Hulk is a rage monster. So it's just really hard to put all of these different type of characters into one movie. And I think Joss Whedon does it really well. He really developed conflict between all the characters because, like I said, they're completely different characters. They almost have nothing in similar. So that's just such a great thing because they keep building conflict, and that really, when they actually work together in the end, in the final battle, it's just a huge thing because at the beginning they hate each other, or at least kind of hate each other, and by the end of it, when they get along and actually work together and care about each other, that's just some really good character growth for all of them. I think this movie is one of the most fun and rewatchable MCU movies because, like, the movie it's not emotional or anything. It's just pure fun. And this movie does it really well. From beginning to end, I have a lot of fun watching this movie. And the third act, the final battle in this movie, it's really well made, and I really like the CGI here. So, yeah, I have it in my top 10. Before I give you guys my top 5, I'm gonna do a few more honorable mentions just because there's a few more movies I want to be mentioned on this list. So first up, we have Black Panther. Black Panther is probably the most mature and thematic Marvel movie ever. I think it just has so many rich themes hidden inside of it, and it just has some really powerful stuff inside it. I think the cast here is amazing. Michael B. Jordan is great as Killmonger, and Chadwick Boseman, I think he gives a great performance as T'Challa in this movie. Rest in peace. And then we have X2. Now, X2 is probably my favorite X-Men movie. I think it has some great action scenes, some great emotions when Jean Grey dies. And I think the characters are handled much better in this movie than they were in the first X-Men. Now, I think they were pretty good in the first X-Men, but here they were great. Especially Logan. I think he just gets a lot of character in this movie. He gets a lot of screen time, so he gets to shine a lot. There's obviously that how the scene in Professor X's school. I think that's a really good fight scene. I think they just shot it really well. The score's amazing in that scene, so I really like it. And then we have Thor Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok is just a really fun movie. I think it's really entertaining. There's some really good jokes, really good action scenes. I think that gladiator scene where Thor fights Hulk is just a really fun scene. And there's just a lot of fan service in this movie. We get to see how character versus characters would be like. There's some really good humor. I think most of the jokes in this movie are really, really funny. So I really enjoy it. And I think even the final battle in this movie just looks beautiful. Just the way it's shot, the CGI, everything. It's amazing. I almost have no issues with this movie. I think sometimes it just gets really funny that it undercuts the emotional scenes. But other than that, I think it's a great movie. And finally, we have Guardians of the Galaxy. To me, Guardians of the Galaxy is really fun, family, personal story. It's just about these people just finding family with each other. I think that's just a really personal story, and I think it sets up the future movies really well. I really enjoy it. I think the jokes work. I think all the characters are really well done. So yeah, so that's going to be my final honorable mention. Kicking off my top 5 is going to be Iron Man. Now, I know a lot of people did not expect this to be this high. I think Iron Man is a really, really well-made movie. I think just the story is really good. Robert Downey Jr. is probably perfect casting for this role. It's one of those castings where you just can't imagine anyone else playing the role because he's come a long way. He's played this character until Avengers Endgame. So it's just really powerful stuff. And watching this movie after watching Avengers Endgame makes it even better because every dialogue, almost all the dialogues in this movie, they just really pay off because of Avengers Endgame, because this is the movie where Tony finds his purpose and all that. And when he sacrifices life in Endgame, I'll talk about that again. It's just some really powerful stuff. I think just his story arc throughout this movie is handled really well. I think just the way at the beginning how he's just this weapons dealer, and by the end of it he understands the consequences, so he stops being a weapons dealer and starts being a hero. I think that's some really powerful storytelling. And I think the cast here is great. Robert Downey Jr., like I said, great as Iron Man. Pepper Potts, I think Gwyneth Paltrow is great. I personally prefer Terrence Howard as Rhodey than Don Cheadle. I like both of them, but I personally prefer Terrence Howard. I know a lot of people will disagree, but I personally do. I think what really holds it back from being higher, I think, is the fact that this movie, the final battle, the third act in this movie is just, it feels rushed. I feel like it just came out of nowhere. You know, Ironmonger is just, the entire movie, he's just trying to kill Tony, but suddenly he rampages through the city and starts destroying vehicles and stuff. So I feel like that feels a bit weird, but other than that, I think this is a great movie. At number 4, I have Avengers Infinity War. Now, for a long time, I had Infinity War at number 1, but thinking about it for a while, it did kind of drop. Now, I don't have many issues with this movie, I'll talk about that, but still, I really love this movie. I think this movie has many great stuff in it. First things first, I think the movie doesn't slow down at all. I think from beginning to end, it's just action scene, joke, action scene, joke. It just moves really fast. So time really passes by fast while watching this movie. This movie's like 2.5 hours, but while watching it, it feels like I only spent 1 hour watching the movie because it just moves so fast. I think the movie has some really good action. I think the battle on Titan is really good. Even the Battle of Wakanda is really good. I think everything is great in this movie. Now, this movie has a lot of characters. But again, just like SpiderVerse, this movie doesn't feel overstuffed at all because all the characters get their time to shine. If you like Captain America, he gets time to shine. If you like Black Panther, he gets time to shine. If you like Iron Man, he gets a lot of time to shine. If you like Thor, he probably has the best moment in the entire movie when he enters in Wakanda, so he gets time to shine. So I think every character in this movie is handled well. Everyone gets what they deserve, so I really like that. I think just this movie doesn't focus on everyone 100%ly. I'm not saying that is a bad thing, because when you have so many characters, you need to have some characters that are like the main set of characters. So in this case, we have Star-Lord, Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, and Thor. And actually we also have Vision and Scarlet Witch. So those are kind of like the main characters with main really visible arcs throughout the movie. So I really like that. Even though the rest of the characters are put aside, they still feel really good. Now, I think the most interesting thing about this movie that brings it so high is Thanos. Thanos in this movie is probably one of the greatest villains of all time. I think he just does a really good job of portraying this threat. Like, he's a physical threat, and he's even a mental threat because he's really smart. He could do anything, anytime without us knowing. I think this really shows what a villain can do in the MCU, because in the MCU there's a lot of villains that are not great, but I think Thanos is one of the best villains just of all time, not just in the MCU. I think that Josh Brolin just does a great job bringing this character to life. I think he has depth, he has an actual character, he isn't just rampaging through the universe and killing everyone. So I really enjoy that. I think what really holds it back from my top 3 is some of the CGI looks bad. I think most of the CGI works really well, but when we have characters remove their helmet and all that, it just feels like a head floating on a suit. That's a bit weird, especially when Hulkbuster's helmet comes off. I feel like if they just put the helmet on and did it, it would have worked, but it's stuff like that that brings it down. That's just small nitpicks. I still think this is a really, really good movie. Before I give you guys my top 3, be sure to give me your list down below in the comments. What do you guys think? What are your favorite Marvel movies? and what are your least favorite if you want to. I think obviously we're gonna have different opinions. You're gonna have different top 10s. I'm gonna have different top 10s. So that's the fun part. We can compare our lists. And with that said, let's continue. So kicking off my top 3 is gonna be Logan. Logan is a great movie. Logan is a movie just, the first time I watched, I was really surprised. But I knew the movie is gonna be good, but I wouldn't expect it to be this high on my Marvel list. I think the movie just did a really good job putting an end to Professor X and Logan himself. I think the movie just continued their entire story and ended it right here. I know a lot of people consider Dark Phoenix as the end of the X-Men saga. Technically it is, but I consider this movie to be the end because this is where it all started off. The first X-Men movie, X2, X-Men The Last Stand, all those movies, they were with these two characters. These two were the lead characters in it. So I think this is where the actual X-Men franchise ended, not Dark Phoenix. I absolutely like this movie. I think this movie has some really good Wolverine action. Because it's R-rated, it's allowed to do whatever it wants. It can there's some really graphic images in this movie. There's just a lot of stuff that I personally really enjoy. I think Logan's character in this movie is amazing. I think at the beginning where he just doesn't care, all he wants to do is move away and go in a boat or something. And by the end of it, he sacrifices his life to save Laura. And because he learns that he's her father, it's just such a powerful thing. And just his death scene, I think it just is done really well. Speaking of Laura, I thought at the beginning that she was going to be what holds this movie down. But I thought she was one of the best things in the movie. I think just the way they showed her character, just the way they showed how her life was affected, I think it was really powerful, and it's a really emotional movie, but I really love it. Now, I did want to put this movie at number 2. I just couldn't quite get it there because this is not one of those movies that I can rewatch quite often because it's really dark. It's not that rewatchable. This movie's completely about death, redemption, regret. You know, all the fun stuff. So, yeah, that's why I can't quite get it up into my top 2. But it's in my top 3, so I absolutely love it. At number 2, I have Captain America Civil War. Every time I watch Captain America Civil War, because I'm pretty sure it's my most rewatched Marvel movie, I love it. Every time I see it, there's something in it that I find that I like. So, I think this movie has some themes, just like Black Panther. I think this movie, it's one of the most thematic Marvel movies. I think it has themes about political stuff. It has themes about friendship. So, I really enjoy that about it. I think as the movie progresses, it starts to get better and better. At the beginning, we obviously have this fight scene against Crossbones, where Scarlet Witch actually destroys a building, which caused a lot of people to die. So I feel like that's what really causes the chain reaction in the movie and pushes the dominoes. And obviously we have Zemo as the villain. I really like Zemo as a villain. I think Zemo he works really well. I think he's one of the most effective villains in the MCU because he achieves his goal. By the end of the movies, the Avengers are still not together. They're split apart. So I think that really adds a lot to the villain and the movie itself. I think obviously the movie has some really good action scenes. Like I said, the opening action scene is really good. And then obviously we have the chase scene with Black Panther, Bucky, and Captain America. That's a really good chase scene. And then moving on, obviously we have the airport fight scene. I know that's a lot of people's favorite, but my personal favorite fight scene is the final battle where Iron Man and Captain America and Bucky duke it out. I think that's just a really emotional scene because we're seeing two friends fighting each other. Now you might say the airport battle, it's also two friends fighting each other. But in this case, it's for personal reasons. It's because Bucky killed Tony's parents, but Steve didn't tell him that. I think that adds so much tension to the story, even though there's already a lot of tension. So a lot of people compare this movie to Batman versus Superman, so I'm gonna do that too. I think if this movie was probably a Warner Brothers movie, this movie would have ended with Captain America, Iron Man, and Bucky fighting a bunch of super soldiers, because that's where they were setting up. But because Disney and Marvel did this movie, I think the movie tried to make it more personal and more gripping. So when Captain America and Iron Man were fighting each other, it would feel more, I would feel more invested in the movie than I would if they're just fighting a bunch of super soldiers. So I feel like that's something that the movie did beautifully, so it comes in at number 2. The reason I can't quite get it up to my number 1 is because I have a problem with Zemo's plan. Zemo's plan sometimes feels a bit weird because there's a lot of coincidences that have to happen for his plan to work. I still think Zemo's a really good villain, but I can't quite get it up to number 1 because I do have that one issue. But coming in at first place, without question for me, is going to be Howard the Duck. The first Marvel movie still remains the best. Just kidding. No, Howard the Duck is not at number 1. But really coming in at first place for me is going to be Avengers Endgame. Avengers Endgame, the first time I saw this movie, I really liked it. I thought it was really good, but I don't think it would have been at number 1. Because while I was in that theater, I thought like the first half of the movie, it just moved really slow. So I was like, it's good, but I don't think it's as good as Infinity War. So I was disappointed by that. But then obviously the final battle happened. I really liked the final battle and the third act in it. I thought it was really emotional. So yeah, I'd still say it wasn't better than Infinity War, because I did have a few problems. I thought Professor Hulk wasn't amazing. I didn't like Fat Thor. But after rewatching the movie as many times as I did, I've watched it like thousands of times since then. But after really rewatching it and understanding what the Russo brothers were trying to do, it really helped. Because after rewatching it, let's talk about Thor first. Thor, I did not like him at all in this movie the first time I saw it. But after rewatches, I really enjoyed it. I thought the funny scenes were really funny, but a lot of times it also felt emotional. Because he has lost a lot. He's lost his mother, his father, his planet, and then half of his people. And obviously, he was the reason half the universe was dead. So I feel like the movie just really builds on that and makes him depressed. So I feel like even though it didn't work the first time, later on it starts to work. Professor Hulk, that's what his story has been. He has been trying to control the Hulk banner. He's been trying to control the Hulk since the Incredible Hulk. So I feel like that's what this movie did. It helped him control the Hulk. So I understood how the story works now, because the rest of the MCU, that's what his story has been. Now I feel like they should have shown some stuff on screen instead of just doing everything off screen. But still, I still really liked it. Now, let's actually talk about the actual main storyline. Time travel. In this movie, time travel is pretty confusing because it's a completely different version of it. But I think the Russo brothers explain it really well. Changing the past doesn't change the future. So I feel like that does it really well. It creates an alternate timeline, which is where the Loki series takes place. Now I did kind of have an issue with this one. In the middle of the biggest movie of all time, because it made the most money, they were setting up a TV show where Loki escaped here. So I feel like that's just doesn't work, because you can't set up a TV show in the biggest movie of all time. But still, I thought it was still a great movie. And if there's a movie that deserves to be called epic, it's this one, because the final battle in this movie, I don't know what's more epic than that. Captain America wields Mjolnir. This was set up back in Age of Ultron, and it pays off here really, really well. the portal scene where all the portals start opening. That's a beautiful scene. I think the shot looks really good. And just Captain America saying Avengers assemble. I've been waiting for that since I was a little kid. So it was just amazing. I really enjoyed the movie. And then after that, we have this gigantic war. And just speaking of the portal scene, I think the score in this movie is really good. I think Alan Silvestri does a really good job with the music. I'm really surprised that he didn't get an Oscar last year, but whatever. I still think it's probably one of the best scores I've ever heard. And Iron Man's sacrifice in this movie is amazing. I think the moment where Iron Man died, I think that was actually the first movie I have ever teared up in. I don't remember any movie at that point, at least, that I teared up in. So the movie was really emotional, really sad, and it put an end to one of my favorite franchises of all time. So it comes in at number 1. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. Be sure to give me a list down below. What are your favorite Marvel movies? And if you want more content like this, please subscribe to SS Multimedia. And if you want it right now, you can check some of those videos out right there. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.